Japan by River Cruise is made possible thanks to those who donate to the show at japanbyrivercruise.com and due to the generosity of our corporate sponsors. This show is brought to you by the Japanese Language Proficiency Test.
Hello there, JBRC listeners. Many of you have likely just completed your most recent Japanese Language Proficiency Test attempt, and you might be feeling a little bummed about how it went. Just in case you are, don't forget the Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times and get up 8. Or as they say it in the original Japanese, Gambaro! And I know it might feel like you've been at it for years, but here's another helpful saying. Sitting on a stone for 3 years might be tough, but it brings change. Or again, in the native tongue, akiramenai. And don't get discouraged by comparing yourself to others. After all, 10 people, 10 colors. Or as my sensei says, Maika. So while you wait for your results, try not to worry too much, because the point of the JLPT isn't to make you feel bad about your relationship with the Japanese language. It's to make you memorize a bunch of complicated and antiquated stuff, when really you were doing just fine with the couple hundred phrases you already knew. Hello, Brian, and welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo.
Hello, I'm Ollie Horn.
And joining us this time is Joe McReynolds. Joe is a researcher at Keio University studying Tokyo's urban development, and is also a national security analyst who's been an advisor on the Clinton and Biden presidential campaigns, as well as on my failed campaign for Hozugawa River Cruise Circus Activities Director. Joe, thank you for joining us.
We almost had it.
We almost did. It was so close.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be on the podcast.
Yay!
Glad to have you. On this show, our topic is City Planning, which is Japanese for city planning, but also English for how Ollie and I produce this show. Joe will tell us what makes Tokyo a spontaneous city. I'm guessing it's easier to be spontaneous with all of those Murio Annaijos on the walk home from the pub. Plus, Ollie's got your weekly River Cruise recommendation. Ollie?
Yes, Bobby, this week's recommendation is the Nagoya River Cruise, which promises to beat the inflation-driven increase in ticket prices of all the other operators by pricing their cruises in US dollars instead.
And this is the season where we always see that yearly fracturing of the River Cruise provider community into 2 rival factions. The ones that encourage swimming in the river as a fun cruise activity, colloquially known as the backstroke cruises, and the ones that strictly prohibit getting in the water, known as the heatstroke cruises. We'll talk on-air about the origins of this rift, and we'll talk off-air about how long of a walk that was to get to a pretty underwhelming joke. But first, Ollie and I are going to jump into our little swan boat and have a little soap talk.
Bobby Judo, it's been another month.
It's been more than a month, technically.
Technically. But we don't...
Technically, it's been more than a month, but other than technically, it's also been more than a month.
But we will release this as our June episode. Okay. How have you been?
Meh. Okay. So my wife and I have a joke that's a bilingual joke that we'll refer to something as majime, which majime,
that's funny.
Yeah, majime in Japanese means diligent or hardworking or earnest or serious.
Majime na hito is like a serious guy.
But maji means like extremely or very. Maji is like a synonym for totemo. And so, because it's a bilingual joke, my wife and I will refer to something as majime to mean like it's extremely meh.
So. Yeah, nice. Funny. So, what have you been describing as Magi so?
Man, I've spent so much money on getting this barbecue shop ready, and it's not earning any money yet.
Yeah. And
we're way behind. And it's just like nonstop work every day. And it's interesting because my wife, she's very, very good at working. This is a weird thing to say in English, but in Japanese you say like shigoto ga dekiru or dekinai, which means like somebody's good at shit or they're not. They can handle their shit or they can't. And
shit's done.
She's good.
Sorry, get shit done, not get shit done.
Yeah, not gets shit's done. She gets shit done. She's good at working. And when she was the manager of a jewelry shop, she got shit done. When she was a bridal coordinator, she got shit done. When anything she's ever done, she's got shit done.
Those kids as well, she managed.
Yeah, she got them done. They're halfway done. So she's good at working, but like her experience has never been the same as my experience as somebody in the creative industry. And I don't think she's ever had a sense of how when you work in a creative field or you're freelance, you're constantly feeling this pressure to produce. And in the Japanese creative industry, I'm sure it's the same in the West as well, but like if you propose 100 projects, if you have 100 irons in the fire, if 2 of them take, that's good. And I've always kind of had this nonstop running mental catalog of things that I need to get done and things that I'm trying to get off the ground. And it's this constant, never-ending struggle. And for the first time ever, I think now that she's a part of, we've started a company together. Our company is funded primarily by my TV and public work. So now that we're doing this together and we're working on this restaurant together, for the first time ever, she's got this sense that like there's this never-ending list of stuff that needs to get done. And up until now, she's always been like a que sera sera type. Like in Japanese, they say naru yo ni naru. And anytime I was like struggling with work or worried about work or stressed about where the next paycheck was going to come from or anything like that, she would say naru yo ni naru, which means it'll be what it'll be.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Like it'll work itself out. And and that idea of it'll work itself out was always kind of a sticking point for me because it's like, no, it won't work itself out. I have to work it out.
Yeah, there's no passive voice here.
Right.
Nareru.
Yeah. And so for the first time ever, I think she's finally got that experience of like, there's so much stuff that you have to get done and the list is never ending and it's not just going to work itself out. I have to work it out. And I'm of two minds because on one hand, it's great that she can finally understand kind of like what I've been doing. For the first time ever, I think I said to her, naru yo ni naru. And she was like, no, I've got to do it. And I was like, that's my life. That's my life. Yeah. And she was like, I have this list of stuff that's never ending. And I was like, exactly. Yeah. But at the same time, I feel this overwhelming guilt for like, I feel like if I hadn't initiated this step away from my talent work, then I would be the only one who had to kind of like bear up under that weight. And I wouldn't have shared it with her. And so, on one hand,
but it's not actually, I don't think it's right to say it's sharing it. It's like, I don't think in a company, I don't think adding a third co-founder means that everyone worries less. You know, it's not like she's taking any load off you. It's like you're just sharing this.
No. It's not like she's taking it off of me, but it's like she's got it for the first time where she never had it before.
Right, yeah.
And so it's like almost like something that I've done to her that I feel like I shouldn't have done.
Right. Well, I mean, and are you suggesting then that she perhaps didn't know what she was getting herself into in this entrepreneurship journey?
No, I don't think so, but I feel like there's an aspect of it that it's like the end goal, the ultimate end goal is that we have more financial freedom and we're less tied to how many hours I can get on TV.
Yeah.
And if we can run our shop as owners and leave it to other people to manage, then we have more time to do the things that we want to do. But until we get there, I kind of feel like the barbecue business was my dream. And it's resulted in this situation where she has to do a lot of work for the sake of my dream, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, have you had a chat to Chuck about this? We have a mutual friend called Chuck who opened up a tiny tiny bar on a yacht called Audi in Fukuoka, then later moved to a bigger bar after I left Japan. But he would talk for hours about how, it was his dream to open this bar, but without his wife sorting out paperwork and doing, just getting shit done, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. I have never talked to Chuck about anything at length except for the strength of his drinks.
Yeah, right, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But I mean, it seems that,
and just for clarity's sake, it's usually like, dude, lay off a bit.
Exactly, yeah, he's a very generous guy. But yeah, what's nice is that, like, your work in the past has always been like your front and center, and I know that when TV crews have come around your house, your wife's not been on camera, and they've got like even a stand-in wife occasionally.
Yeah,
and that
I've
kind
had
of
a
thing.
stand-in wife on TV.
Yeah, but this is yours and hers thing. I really get the sense that, well, actually, it is your face on the goddamn bottle. But I don't know, my impression.
But
of,
it's
like, reading
all
her.
Posts her the social media is all her. The design choices are all her. She's working so hard and putting so much of herself into it, and my hope is that when it finally gets up and going, she'll feel accomplished. She'll feel pleased with how it goes.
And are you still the one that's actually barbecuing these meats, or you're not actually selling barbecue meats yet?
No, I'm still the one who's doing the cooking, and that's one of the issues because she can't do the cooking. She doesn't know how, and also doesn't have the time. Okay. And so the goal is to train somebody else in how to cook spare ribs or how to cook like American style barbecue chicken. Just set up a system where we can just kind of teach somebody and make a manual and have somebody follow the manual.
It's my gut feeling is it sounds easy, but it's not, is it?
No, it's not that hard. It's one of those things like. One of my all-time favorite webcomics is I think his Instagram name is Adam Tots, but it's like one of those, how it's a super common trope to have like somebody try to follow a recipe and they messed it up really bad and they say like the recipe and then the picture, like the goal and the reality. He has a webcomic where it's like the goal is this super super perfect cake. And then it's like the reality is the exact same cake. And then it's like the next frame is the guy going like, what? I followed the directions. It wasn't that hard. And I feel like if you follow, there's instructions. And if you follow the instructions, you'll get it.
Yeah, but you are dealing with unknown quantities because it's not like you've made your barbecue recipes for hundreds of diners over a period of years. It's not like McDonald's where like they know how to make a Big Mac now. Well,
you've got a very good point, but we are figuring it out. And like, it's interesting because to make barbecue sauce, there's a certain proportion that you follow to make one bottle of barbecue sauce. And then if you use that same proportion to make 10 bottles of barbecue sauce, it's a little bit different. And then because the vinegar is strong. And so if you say like for one bottle of barbecue sauce, you use 60 grams of vinegar, but for 10, you use 600, all of a sudden you get super sour vinegar in your barbecue sauce.
I don't get it. I actually, maybe I do get it because like you need enough vinegar in order to taste it. But then any more,
so
I think this might make sense.
So without getting into too much detail, I use about 65 milliliters of vinegar to make one bottle of barbecue sauce.
That's already quite a lot of detail.
But to make 35 bottles of barbecue sauce and have the same taste, you use about 1,000 milliliters of vinegar.
Interesting. So the effect of vinegar is non-linear.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Good. Well, I've said this every time
Ollie,
we talk about it. I'm really looking forward to trying it. Yeah.
Why won't you come back to Japan and work in my barbecue shop?
Yeah, you can't afford me, baby. I'd love to. Well, I mean, obviously, technically. Well, a couple of things, actually. I think I'm now too late to ever get a working holiday visa in Japan. I think you've got to be 30 or less.
Got to be under 30.
Under 30, is it? You can't be 30 exactly?
I don't know.
Well, whatever happens, I'm turning 31 in a few months, so that's that.
So mid-20s.
No, I'm still in my mid-20s, baby.
I've got to say, like, I know the last handful of shows, the last like year of shows, you've alluded to stuff that's going on with you that's been bad.
Yeah.
But in the last month, not only have I thoroughly loved your stand-up clips that you put up on Instagram, but talking to you, you sound like you're in a better place.
I am in a better place. I am. I've done lots of alluding on the podcast, haven't I? And only recently have I kind of come to terms with what's happened. But the long story short is I've been a close family member has been involved in some domestic violence and domestic abuse, and it's also related to some alcoholism.
Yeah, I would like domestic abuse has kind of been the culmination of it, but it's been a long cycle of.
Yeah, well, I think anyone that's ever known an alcoholic knows that alcoholics just it's a really, really horrible illness, and you need to treat it like any other illness and have empathy. But it is it's quite a destructive thing, and it just creates a frequency, and it sucks oxygen, and you're not really aware of the effects it has on the people around you. And interestingly, the people around who are affected by it aren't clear either. I think Bobby is pretending. I hope he's pretending to neck a bottle of vodka, which actually. Well, that was very much my experience. I was just finding empty vodka bottles here and everywhere, and it's the whole thing's sad. The whole thing's sad, and it affected me more than I realised. And Bobby and I were having chats as friends where he was saying things that were just, it's just so obvious. This is what you've got to do, but it changes your brain chemistry when you're around people that are sick. So
yeah. So when you look at something from the outside, you have this sense that, like, it's very easy to see what steps to take. And it's very easy to say, you've just got to take this step. You've just got to make this leap. And then once you make the leap, you've done it. And looking back, you go, oh, yeah, this was the step to take.
Yeah, it's so obvious. And I think it's because there's this funny intersection between kindness and self-respect. And I think that you can kind of trick yourself into thinking you're being kind when actually you're just eroding your own boundaries and self-respect.
Or enabling somebody else. And
yeah, precisely.
I think it's funny because you taught me this analogy about stand-up comedy and the idea that stand-up comedy and humor works because of the leap that the audience is willing to take with you.
Oh yeah, this is the Steve Martin cliff analogy.
Yeah, and that idea of like crossing the cliff, how far it takes to cross the cliff, seems to me to be a very, very similar analogy to the idea of that step it takes to go this far and no farther.
Yes, and also I think, my therapist said this to me. She said that often when people are in abusive relationships or in an environment which is bad for them, right? Often you can rationalize the leaving, but what you can't rationalize is how on earth you're going to process the grief after, or how you're going to, like, you just know that leaving a really toxic job, although it seems like the right thing to do, it's really hard to imagine the nice job you're going to have after, or leaving a relationship that's not working out for you. It's like, even if you can rationalize, yes, I should be out of here, knowing how hard it is to then deal with the mess that you're leaving behind you is often a reason for inertia.
That's an interesting thing to hear you say, because I know traditionally you've been kind of like skeptical of the benefits of therapy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I literally, it basically what it took was me having a breakdown in a green room, and I was doing a show, and a comic which I don't know very well but is very famous overheard me talk to a friend about
Michelle
something
Wolf.
I was fed up with.
Michelle Wolf of The Daily Show and the Michelle Wolf Show fame.
Yeah, well, look, she's lovely. She's really sweet, and she basically just gave me a couple of home truths. And comics are very good at doing this, right? Because I think we're all like, there's something wrong with all of us. And that was kind of a turning point where I was like, right, I've really got to do something about this. I can't be professionally sad as well. And I said to my therapist on the first session, I am skeptical of this, but I'm doing it because I don't know what else to do. I can't just start another podcast because I'm feeling sad. And
not true.
And Yeah. Anyway, well, whatever it is, it works. And
Dude,
if
Casey from Ishikawa Summit to Sea will tell you that is categorically untrue.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I now I do it every week, and it is a little bit like a podcast, and I do it on this software that's like Zoom, and I do try and get a good few laughs in. And I mean, basically, if anyone's listening to this is me basically saying, hey, look, we've had to go to a less regular schedule, and things have been a bit sloppy. A lot of it's down to the fact that I didn't really know what I was doing with myself, and now I do genuinely feel like I've got a little bit of clarity, and dare I say, I've felt feelings of happiness in the past few weeks, which I've genuinely not felt in the past 6 months. And I don't know, I'm sure people listening to this have had feelings like this, where I genuinely thought, and I know this sounds really arrogant and conceited and pathetic, but I thought that mental health was the kind of thing which is like, you can outsmart it, right? It's like, well, if only you're clever enough, you can just persuade your brain to think differently. And that is categorically untrue. And it's sad to experience, right? Your own brain telling you to like think a certain thing, and your brain not letting you, or your body reacting viscerally to its surroundings, and you knowing that's irrational, and then not being able to override it. All that stuff. Anyway, look, seeing a therapist has helped. And if anyone is listening to this and was like me, thinking therapy's for idiots to share their stupid feelings with unqualified losers, wrong. It's for idiots like me to share their stupid feelings with qualified smart people. And I'll put a link in the I use BetterHelp, and I know they've had loads of scandals and stuff, but like I stumbled across a good therapist, so I'll put a link in the bio if anyone wants that. I'm sure there's something where like you get a free session or something. I'll find out if we can both benefit from our mutual sadness, listeners. But anyway, look, that's I think it feels quite good to say this. I've not many people have really known, and obviously I'm not sharing all the details with you lot. Can't trust you all. But Dave, thanks for sticking with us,
Ryan.
Yeah, bloody Brian, can't wait.
But speaking of listeners who we can trust, we'd like to say thank you to anybody who's ever financially expressed their appreciation for our show.
So buymeacoffee.com, you can give a one-off donation if you enjoy the show, or you can subscribe, and you can do what some people do, which is subscribe then cancel. We don't judge you that hard, when you get access to the bonus.
Yeah, speaking of which, in terms of our coffees, we've got Heaven Chai, who joined as a member and then canceled, and then when we called them out in the show last time, sent us a message saying, didn't expect to be called out for canceling so quickly, and then joined again, and then canceled again.
Did he?
I believe
That's funny.
Based on the screenshot that you sent me, I think so. But that's fine. That's fine, because that means they gave us $10. And $10, I mean, that's like 3.3 bottles of barbecue sauce.
Yeah, or it's 20 minutes of therapy. So well, I mean, basically, but if you do the membership thing, you get a link to a private podcast feed where we put all of the extras. This week's extras are good because we've recorded them, and we often say this, but sometimes the extras are better than the main episode. Also, Bobby, you can show appreciation by just saying something nice, can't you? It doesn't have to be accompanied by money.
Yeah, that's true. To wit, we got an email from Luke Rolls. Luke Rolls. Luke, you do. You rock Luke and said, you roll.
That's right. He said, I just wanted to say I'm really enjoying listening to Japan by River Cruise podcast. I like the fact that he specifically mentioned podcast there, separating it from all of our other oeuvre. Hope you and Bobby continue to make it. I look forward to seeing your stand-up when it becomes available. Thanks. I've just started putting some reels on my Instagram, Ollie Horn Comedy, if you want to check that out, Luke. With thanks for what you're doing and feedback that your work translates. A super funny and listening treat at this end. All the best, Luke. Luke, these things genuinely mean more than you can imagine. So thanks for taking the time to email that.
I mean, it's really common to say that, like, you get 99 positive messages and one negative one, and that one negative one sticks out. Luke, we would like you to know that we are not popular enough to get any negative messages. And this one, it really sticks out.
Oh, that's great. Right, Bobby, let's jump into the interview we did with Joe as we welcome him to the Captain's Table. Ahoy! Joe, welcome to the captain's table.
Happy to be here. Let's do it.
All right. Jumping right in. Joe, you've co-authored a book called Emergent Tokyo, Designing the Spontaneous City, in which you talk about how flexible microspaces are critical to the vitality of the city. Now, I hate to be critical myself, but I've been flexibly crammed into some of the microspaces on the Yamanote line, and I'd say the vibe is less vitality and more kill me, please. So maybe it would be better if you walked us through what you mean by that sentiment.
So in Tokyo, there are a few types of buildings or neighborhood configurations and things like that that produce what I call microspaces. These small spaces that can be used for a lot of different things. One obvious example is houses. Unlike in most American cities, in Japan, if you have a 2-story row house in a residential neighborhood, by right, you can put pretty much whatever thing you want in the bottom floor. You could put in a little bar, a little restaurant, a little workshop, a boutique, and you could rent that out to someone else. You're maybe a retiree and you miss having liveliness around you, and so you rent out your bottom floor to some young kid who wants to start a coffee shop. That's a type of microspace. Another are yokocho alleyways. For those who've never been to Japan, think of like these like kind of narrow, dingy alleyways that grew out of the black markets after World War II. And then they started having tons of little bars and restaurants over time. And so that would, those are also micro spaces that are kind of open to the public. You can walk in and have a bite to eat, have a drink.
So let me ask right here. My general impression as an American, I've been in Japan for 16 years now, but still something that blows me away is my general sense that the number of restaurants that are seemingly sustainable in Japan is huge compared to America.
Massive difference.
And just to be clear what we mean by restaurants, because I think the concept of a restaurant is different. Like when ask a British person or American what they mean by restaurant, they're thinking like they're imagining 100 covers.
TGI Fridays.
When I'm thinking when I'm thinking restaurant, I'm thinking the guy that was that was doing his shop in Daimyo and can't have had more than 6 seats selling steak and rice.
Yeah, and there are so many barriers we put up to creating restaurants in the States and often in the UK too. I mean, this is less about what people want to do, because people love starting little mom and pop restaurants, coffee shops, things like that, and more about what we make it possible or reasonable for them to do. So Tokyo has over 10 times as many bars and restaurants as New York City. It's I would say the city with the most restaurants anywhere in the world, and a huge share of those are just these tiny little operations. Because give you an example, liquor licenses. One of the ways that restaurants make money is by serving booze. And how much does it cost to get a liquor license in your city? In Tokyo, it can be like I think like $100 in a form and wait a couple weeks, something easy like that. In America, it can be as much as $500,000 for a liquor license, and over a year of permit wrangling and things like that. And this is kind of unsexy stuff, municipal regulations. That's what I tune into a comedy podcast for. But it actually like makes a giant difference for what you can do in a city, what sort of things you can experiment with. Can you just kind of open a shoebox devoted to your personal beloved niche interest and see who shows up, maybe have a couple regulars that you have drinks with? Or do you have to plan out this kind of Applebee's style, it makes sense on the spreadsheet thing to open a restaurant?
Yeah, and when you say niche interest, it could be anything from like tacos to anime songs to Austrian bread to Australian coffee to anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, this guy that I was talking about, the guy that opened the steak place, he went to Australia once, loved it, opened up a little wine bar called Osru, and he literally just had one pan, which he would cook steak on, and that was the food.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it was sustainable. He also had another job. I think he was a surf instructor, and like he just but it was viable for him to only open this 6 hours at night. And this goes back to exactly what you were saying, that like he isn't incentivized to make his operations bigger because he doesn't have those kind of overheads. And it's not just about the liquor license.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's not trying to open at weird hours. This is actually something that they studied in Shimokitazawa, which, for those of you who've never heard of it, it's kind of like
that's where Good Heavens is.
A genteel hipster district, like the more the more fancy pants parts of Brooklyn.
I think lots of our listeners will know it because Bobby and I used to perform a lot of comedy there.
Oh, great! Yeah, and so Shimokitazawa, they went around and they measured what percentage of the businesses in Shimokitazawa keep weird hours that don't make any sense from just a maximize your customers, maximize your profit perspective. And it was actually like a huge percentage. It was like 30-40%.
Yeah.
Especially the small businesses. And that tells you that people are feeling some freedom to like try things and let it fit into the other aspects of their life and what they're about. That they can... Yeah. Oh, yeah, Bobby, you got your barbecue restaurant. I mean, it's...
Well, I was going to say that's great because if you ran that same statistical analysis in America, that would tell you which restaurants are mafia.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in DC, there are these weird suit shops in a rich area of town that no one ever buys suits there. The suits are like 1980s, 1980s soap opera suits. And they are perpetually have a going out of business sale sign, and they've been there 30 years with that sign, and it's you just kind of know. Organized crime.
That suit is going to have 3 kilos of cocaine in the pocket.
No, but for both business runners and also customers too, I think it comes down to like finding your happiness, finding your true self, your authentic self in the city. How do people find what feels authentic and right and true to them in the city? And having a wide variety of niche businesses for the people who run them, for the people who visit them, that ends up being really meaningful. It makes a city feel like a thing that you can connect with and be a part of a community versus just kind of a series of consumer interactions.
In the extras, we spoke about the robot cafe in Tokyo, which is an example of the city responding to perceived demand. And what we're talking about here is that there's kind of a generation, or there's a layer of supply in Japanese cities that is there not simply to respond to consumer demand, but because there's a low enough barrier to entry, and there's not as much of an imperative to recoup as many costs as there is in other countries, that people can just do fun things and see if it sticks, right? I think that's generally where this conversation's going.
So there's a neighborhood of Tokyo that I find absolutely fascinating, that grew through exactly that mechanism, which is Otome Road in Ikebukuro, and it's a whole district of Tokyo that's largely devoted to young women who love homoerotic fan fiction.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know the phrase otome from Otome Game.
Yeah, like Maiden Road, literally in English, Maiden Road. And it's people who love, say, Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy getting together, or Iron Man and Captain America. That's actually a pairing they call Starks and Stripes. Or Kirk and Spock is the classic one. But you have a whole district of the city devoted to this kind of homoerotic.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have to take
fiction.
like a 5-minute break because Brian just heard Kirk and Spock and is gonna need some time in the bathroom.
I mean, well, if you go to Otome Road, you can get some scintillating reading material.
And I guess the point is that like these subcultures in other countries, they obviously would exist online, or maybe would exist in like some pop-up market store.
Yes, that's that's literally the exact phrase I've used. It's like, it's on the internet, it's at the convention twice a year. Like that fan fiction, so popular in America, in China, in Europe, and only in Tokyo do you feel it like taking on physical form. And how that happened was a bookstore in Ikebukuro, they experimented with like one bookshelf for this style of like BL, boys love, like light novels and fan fiction. And then it was so successful that it went from one bookstore's one shelf to a whole bookstore, and then two, and then three, and then businesses aimed at the same demographic, cutesy butler cafes or cosplay supply emporiums, or all sorts of, boy band kind of idol group performance stages.
Yeah.
And you can there's a role play cafe called the Boys Love Academy there, where the idea of this role playing cafe is that you are the only female exchange student at this all boys prep school, and the waiters are like playing all the types, the lovable jock, the brooding goth boy, and they're all secretly in love with each other, and you can pay cash to create storylines that they will act out as they serve you tea and coffee and things like that. And that's just an idea someone had, and I was interviewing them.
That's an idea that someone had in other countries. There would be incentives to stop. That they have the idea and they enjoy that idea. But what we're going to talk about on this podcast is that there are specific legal technicalities that mean that Japan not only allows this, but encourages it.
Yeah, exactly. It's everything from like legal, regulatory, history, culture, public policy, like the Ikebukuro as a place where there used to be a black market post World War II that then, when they shut down the black markets, got divided up into a lot of microspaces, or the fact that a bunch of commuter train lines out to well-to-do suburbs that go to girls' schools in the area had like so many like high school girls with spending money going through Ikebukuro, or the easy regulations around not only small business but honestly intellectual property, like you can sell fan fiction with famous characters. Like you go into the big homoerotic fan fiction bookstores on Maiden Road, and it's not only like Harry Draco, it's like you have the whole Harry Potter section, and it'll be sorted by whether Harry or Draco is the dominant one, and that's like a different shelf, and like and they're not worried about Warner Brothers or Marvel or whoever coming in and shutting them down. The thing that actually helped coming into this as someone who's a national security analyst rather than, a PhD academic in Tokyo studies or anything like that is, when you're an academic, you're looking at this very narrow slice of a big, chaotic, complex picture. Like you're looking at, you're doing your whole PhD thesis on one bookstore or one neighborhood. And as an intelligence analyst, a national security analyst, our whole thing is just combine data, insights from a bunch of different places to try and build something new. And that actually really helped for understanding Tokyo, because you got to look at everything. You got to look at history, culture, public policy, economics. You got to look at the big flashy stuff and the granular stuff too. And that actually ended up being a big theme of the book.
So we've had a chat kind of from the supply side, right?
Yeah.
That there's just various legal and cultural reasons why the barrier to entry is lower, and the fact that it can sustain. As an aside, by the way, does that mean that churn is higher? Like, is it more likely that Japanese restaurants and small businesses fail? Is that why new ones keep popping up? Or
I mean, they fail a ton in America too. Like I think it's some like 80-90% of restaurants and new restaurants in America close within 5 years.
I think it's 3 years.
Yeah. It's like going into journalism or stand-up comedy or academia. Basically, no matter how bad the odds get, it will be someone's dream. And they'll have the rose-colored picture of that dream. And so the people will keep trying it, even if there's not really a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, realistically.
On that note, tickets for my Edinburgh Fringe show are on sale.
Oh, I was going to say that. You beat me to it. It's less mean if you say it yourself.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, moving on from kind of the supply side, right? And I think, we probably... I'd love to talk to Bobby specifically about like the barriers that he's faced setting up his restaurant or not. But before we do that, let's quickly jump to the demand side and people's experience of cities. So why does Tokyo feel different?
So to me, Tokyo feels different because it has a wider emotional color palette than a lot of other cities, and there are concrete reasons for that. I mean, that's a fluffy phrase, but what I mean by that is Tokyo opens up spaces where you can experience different kinds of feelings, different kinds of communities and belonging, different kinds of experiences that a lot of other cities just don't make it that possible to do. And when you have enough of that, it hits a critical mass. Give you an example. You walk down Yasukuni Street, the famous street in Shinjuku. Everyone who's never been to Tokyo, you've seen it in movies. It's the neon up the outside of the buildings. I mean, we call it neon, but it's all LED these days. But you know what I'm talking about. The iconic neon skyline of Tokyo. Yeah. And up those buildings, every single floor is little businesses, and they might be food, they might be drink, they might be carousing, they might be some niche subculture thing, they might be part of the sex and intimacy economy, who knows, but they are someone's dream, someone's yearning in those up in those buildings. And in America, you go above the first, second floor, and for various reasons, it's either offices or residences. Like, you don't have stuff that's open to the public up there. And that just gives more space for more possibilities, that you can find the thing that really resonates with you. You can find a different side of yourself. You can see the multiple versions of yourself in the city as you try all these different places and experiences.
Let's move the discussion on. Something that occurred to me while I spent some time in France, specifically Paris last month, is Paris is really interesting because it has fairly high density living compared to other major world cities. Most of the city is like 6-story high buildings, absolutely full of apartments, and they all have good bakeries underneath them, right? And it occurred to me that these residents are super incentivized to make sure that they've got really good stuff underneath them. And that's different to how a lot of town planning in the UK works, which is you take like a 10-minute walk to get to a little hub, a little high street where there is all your conveniences.
Or the US, where the residential areas are, especially in the suburbs, completely divorced from the commerce centers. Yeah.
Exactly. And in your book, you talk about how one of the biggest levers to make sure that you've got good amenities where you live is to be the landlord of the commercial space yourself. And that's obviously very common in Japan. So can you talk a bit about how the incentives of people who are renting commercial property, when they're not purely financial, can change the way a city feels?
Yeah, I think it's not even just being your own landlord, though that's definitely one way of doing it. It's maybe you inherited your parents' old row house and you live in Kyushu and you're just kind of happy to have someone doing something with it. Or maybe you're kind of the pillar of the local community and you own 20 properties, but you're wedded to the community. It's really, they're all different strange landlord stories, but just having it be something other than dollars and cents on a spreadsheet, it makes all the difference in the world. And that's true of a lot of these like Yokocho alleyways too, that like some of them, they put their land into a trust or a nonprofit or something like that, or they have some management model to keep decision making about who goes in and who comes out being something other than just what's the maximum for profit. And in New York, I've been living in New York the past year because my wife was working with the United Nations. And in New York,
Humble
the
brag.
really cool little businesses are... they have some story often of what their relationship with their landlord is. There's
Sorry, Bobby just made me laugh by suggesting another reason that you're a spy is your wife works for the UN. Just give it up, or come up with a better cover story.
I would be the worst spy in the world. Like anyone
That's
who
what the
knows
best spy in
me
the world
and
would
is listening
say.
to this, yeah,
Hiding
anyone who
in
knows me
plain
and
sight.
listening to this, is
Hiding
like,
in
yeah, Joe
plain
would
sight, Joe.
be executed instantly as a spy. Like I would be the one out in the courtyard for the summary execution where they're saying, American devils, we're not mad, we're just disappointed. You're not sending your best,
No. You've got to craft your spy identity. Hi, what's your American name? Joe McReynolds.
Were you just looking at a
Joey
McDonald's when you said that, sir?
Yeah.
No. What's your middle name? Burger. Are you going to say King? No.
It is a very McLovin name, I know, but I promise you, my real name.
All right. So sorry, as you were saying.
No, yeah, just like, and that's something. I mean, you don't want to be the kind of the asshole sticking your nose into everyone's business, asking, "Hey, what's your relationship with your landlord?" When you walk around a city, but
combative.
Yeah, but in New York, like I talking to small businesses in New York, I found that like the little charming bookstore or the mom and pop Ukrainian restaurant that's been there 50 years, you find that they have some special accommodation. They're not just a line on a spreadsheet, and that changes the texture and the feeling of a city.
So how can we protect that? Because what you're essentially saying is there's a certain strata of businesses which, according to normal market conditions, should not be there. So like, in order to protect this, presumably we've got to like not let normal market conditions function. So how can other cities around the world learn from this model? And I mean, while it's easy to say cut red tape, like what specifically, if a city wanted to have the vibrancy of Tokyo, and I do think it's a laudable aim, what are the easy wins that they could do?
Well, there are easy wins in terms of if you have all the power in the world, sure, it's easy. But politically, I mean, like in the United States, if everyone is so obsessed with their property values, and so the idea of your neighbor opening a little bar in the house next to you, that's like Guernica, Gotterdammerung, like for us. It's you would be in years of knockdown, drag out fights to keep it from happening. And in Tokyo, it's just, okay, my neighbor's opening a bar. I'll talk to them about, keeping quiet after certain hours and we'll figure it out. And I think if you have that spirit of we'll figure it out, a lot of things become possible that otherwise are just, it's this combative zero
Basically,
sum.
what you're saying is it's not possible around the rest of the world because foreigners cause meiwaku. Only possible in Japan.
In Japan, I mean, there's so much meiwaku too. It's just they kind of, because zoning got kicked up to the national level, you don't have the same power at the local level to block things. People kind of have to work it out. But no, like there's this amazing music space I love in Azabu-Juban. It's a classical piano space. It's very genteel and it's free and they do free shows for children. And their neighbor calls the cops on them like every week. They actually have like a wall of photos of every time the police show up. It's kind of a badge of honor. Like that goes back to the whole thing I think we talked about in the extras of, people have this imagination, this imaginary view of Japan as this harmonious place where everyone just gets along in a way that's uniquely Japanese. And no, people piss each other off in Japan.
Yeah.
People have friction with each other in Japan. It's the structure allows for it to be resolved differently. And I think that's really the key. But bottom line is just expand what people can do with their own houses. I mean, you want to create flexible micro spaces. Let people do what they want in the bottom floor of their house. Maybe a bar is a bridge too far for the average American, suburban community, but let people sell food out of their house, homemade food. If a mom and pop operation selling homemade bento boxes, if people are getting sick from it, no one's going to buy the bento boxes. I mean, even Japan's food regulations, that thing is, Japan's food and restaurant regulations are actually among the most lax in the developed world.
Sure.
We think of Japan as this very clean place, and anyone who's tried to find soap in like a Japanese train bathroom knows that like Japan is not actually this miraculously clean country.
Sure. Well, let's stop there and let's ask Bobby the question. Bobby, what food do you cook from your home that could make me sick?
All of it.
And why doesn't it? Is it because of regulation telling you not to, or because you care?
Are you asking me what regulations there were that were barriers for me to start my business?
Yeah, in a kind of a silly, funny way, yeah.
Okay, am I close enough to my mic? Should I get a little bit... Yeah, can you hear me? Is this okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, hold on. None.
Really?
Basically none.
Now you've made your mic non-sanitary.
Yeah.
No. There are some, but it's the bare minimum, and
Yeah.
it's incredibly easy. I remember actually, like my second year in Japan, I got my shokuhin eisei sekininja shikaku, which is your like food hygienic, your food management hygiene license. It's very easy to get. You attend a seminar and you pay some money and you get it. And then if you're going to be selling food somewhere, they come out, like somebody comes out to check to see you're following all the regulations. But the regulations are basically like you have a sink.
You have a sink and you're not allowed to piss in it.
But yeah. If you're operating like a standard restaurant, you have to have a separate sink for washing dishes and washing hands. But like the regulations are so reasonable. They're so reasonable that it feels like there's no barrier.
Yeah, so like your barbecue sauce, right? When you're bottling it and putting it in your glass bottles, do they check that you've sterilized it, for example?
So right now, the stuff that we're making for our products that we're selling, there are no required permissions. And it's because we're not cooking anything raw. It's because basically what we're doing is recombining already produced products. So like our barbecue sauce is made of a blend of basically like it's made from ketchup and vinegar and liquid smoke and brown sugar. It's made of all of these things that are already approved, so that our process of combining them doesn't require any extra permissions. You could basically, you don't have to have a restaurant kitchen or a commercial kitchen. You could produce it in your own kitchen. And this is something that I like confirmed 3 times with the local Health and Hygiene Regulatory Commission, because I was like, I can't believe that it's this easy.
They must have wondered why you kept calling. Sir, how are you planning to stir this sauce,
Well,
please? Why do you keep asking these questions?
As a TV reporter, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to some report about somebody who's just operating a home business where they're selling bentos out of their home kitchen, or they're selling some sort of kakohin, some sort of like processed food that they package and build in a slightly reformed home kitchen. And the regulations for a commercial kitchen are things like, you have to have a door, you have to have a washable floor, you have to have a ceiling. It's like so bare bones that pretty much if you have a walled-in space, you could accomplish it.
Honestly, like there's a famous ramen restaurant in Tokyo, Ramen Jiro, where their venting solution is, because ramen is very hot and sweaty, and their venting solution is basically they just like punched a hole in the wall with a sledgehammer, and it works. And they do it, and the health and safety inspections on restaurants in Tokyo are like every 5 to 7 years. The sort of thing that in an American city would just never fly, and yet in Tokyo it works. And I think we can, if we trust people more. That's really the thing, right? It's about how much do you trust a stranger with your safety, and trust gets repaid on a communal level if you put it in.
But at the same time, when there's a failure in protecting that safety, the consequences are dire. I remember there was an incident when I was here in 2007 where somebody ate bad yuke, which is it's like raw meat it's like a tartare. It's basically like a Korean tartare. And somebody ate bad yukke. And then like for like 5 years, it was forbidden to sell yukke anywhere in Japan.
Oh, that's classic Japanese reactive policy. Like a lot of my friends, they visit Tokyo for the first time and they just assume that there are no trash cans in public because of some Japanese cultural thing. And it's like, oh no, it was the sarin gas attack, and that, you know, they hid the weapons in trash cans, and so the reactive policy was remove all the trash cans.
Yeah. So speaking of some Japanese cultural thing, we've talked about this idea that there are all these niche businesses that can thrive in Japan because of kind of like the zoning and land use policies. But what would you say to the idea that there's also something essentially cultural about Japanese people identifying a certain thing that they're passionate about and perfecting it?
And running with it. And making it bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah, they kind of let's call that a combo of like otaku culture, shokunin culture, bukatsu culture.
Shokunin being craftsman, and bukatsu being when you come all over someone's face.
I'm just gonna move right on.
I just derailed the entire show, didn't I?
Yeah.
Did not see that one coming.
That's what she said.
I can't take you anywhere. No, but like people put out a number of like. All right, we're gonna take a moment. We're gonna take a moment,
and we're gonna wonder after that bukake lead off what you were gonna say. People put out. All of my friends
listening to this know that I'm like, I have the filthiest sense of humor, but then I'm like desperately trying to be a professional human being here, and so
I'll give up.
The tables have truly turned. No, but like there people toss out a lot of cultural explanations for that kind of phenomena. Like another one I hear a lot is like in the 60s and 70s that Japanese corporations decided that if they had their salarymen have hobbies, they would be more fulfilled and more productive workers. Like that's kind of a thing that I don't know if that's an urban legend or actually true, but I've heard from like management consultants. And so you hear a lot of these cultural explanations, and I'm sure there is, you know, something to each of them, but we have amazing craftsmen in other countries. We have people who are really into a specific, you know, niche thing in America. I mean, we talked about the homoerotic fan fiction enthusiasts, and you know, those are, you know, these things exist around the world too. It's just a question of who gets to actually take on physical space. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if we changed all the zoning and everything in America and allowed these niche businesses, it wouldn't take off in the same way. But I think it might. You know, it might, the texture, the nuances might be different. But I really do think we are less different. We, you know, the outside world are less different than Japan in a lot of respects.
Yeah.
Than we let on. It's kind of the material stuff that produces a different result. I'm not discounting the role of culture, but I think we tend to overstate it because it's a just so story. You know, you can't falsify a story about culture. And so I think if we want to be curious, if we want to go deeper, we kind of have to hear out the cultural story, but kind of set it aside and start looking at the city as this concrete thing and how it works.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm also of the mind that I don't want to blanket attribute things to cultural stereotypes, but at the same time, I see what's going on in the American zeitgeist, and I want to say, like, good luck with your homoerotic fanfiction zoning in the current climate.